A guy going to sell to you a base core, which is a specific large measure of dirt, mira bechevel, and it's I'm going to measure it by rope, which means exact measure, very precise. Paul's kosher or yeser, Paul's kosher if he
is Bava Basra mostly concerned with land or
buying and selling stuff.
okay?
Not just land.
Okay. It's all going on.
Yeah. Basically, if it's supposed to be a precise measure, if he ended up therefore delivering less than the transaction was supposed to, then you deduct from the purchase. You deduct kosher. If he added on something, then yachzir, so the buyer has to give it back. If, however, the buyer said, or the seller said, it was stipulated in the contract, some leeway. He said a rope measure, but if a little bit more, if a little bit less, meaning there won't be necessarily 100% price. Besides, even if it's off by a rova per saw, which is 1/24th. A rova is a quarter and of a cob, and there's 6 cob in a saw, so it's 1/24th. Even if there's a margin for up to 1/24th. If it's pachas rova saw, so that much, by that much less, or hosi rova saw that much more, then we say that the sale stands as is. If it's more than that, then they have to reckon what the difference was. What does the seller give back? The seller give him more land, the seller refund money. If the seller was off and he did not sell enough, what does he give back? So we say Mos. He gives orders to give back Mos, he gives it back money, he refunds all the purchase price. If he wants, he gives him back the land. Why did they say why did they say he gives it back money? To actually make it to the seller's advantage. In other words, the seller always gets advantage where a mistake was made. Was shiur beside the base tisha carbon. If there was enough land worth in order to make it worth his while, the mocher to still cultivate it, which is the measure of 9 kav in a field, and the gina base chatzi kav, and the gina, which is a vegetable garden, much less, 1/18th of that, half a kav. Even one level less than that, 1/36th of the measure by a field-based robot, amount which it takes to grow a quarter of a kav. Maxul karka. So then, let's talk about the other way around. The seller, the buyer, gives back the land to the seller. So the seller can decide that he wants land instead of money, right? Instead of additional payment, he wants money. Now, when they give back the land in this case, he doesn't just get back the quarter, elas kol hamosa, but rather all the excess. Now, that's not exactly clear what that means. It has to be really turned around in order to understand it. What it means is that if the mistake is by 1/24th, right? So I might say, let's say if the mistake was by 1/23rd, which is a little bit larger than 1/24th. So you don't just go give back enough to bring it down to an acceptable error, to 1/24th or less. Rather, you give back all the error, right? In other words, once you're off by over the limit, you don't just pare it down to the limit, but you pare it down to what it actually should have been. Okay? Says Marhacha Marhikyo. Rambam says that that actually next Mishnah it says Yigio that up to 1/6 an error is permitted, which obviously is very similar to the amount which constitutes onah, right? Even though there's no onah, there's no formal prohibition of ripping somebody off by land, unless you go way higher. But nevertheless, the leeway, as the next Mishnah put it, is a quarter, is a 1/6 in being an error, right? When it's an error, not intentional rip-off. Here, the leeway is only Here you say not that way, right? Here you say it's not just it's not 1/6, rather 1/24. And he said, "Lo so lo. Not only that, when you give it back, you don't just give back to make it less than 1/24, but rather or everything which is in excess. In other words, the shiur here is much more strict, right? It's 1/24 as opposed to 1/6, right? So he says, here, although the Mishnah, the Gemara doesn't fully give the answer is really very simple. The answer is that here he says he's going to give it based on a survey, based on rope. So therefore the margin of error is much smaller, because he said he's going to measure very precisely when he does it, right? That's why the margin of error is severely restricted. And therefore also the other thing that's explaining here is why you go back down fully. In other words, you don't just get within the margin of error, which is to go into 1/24, rather you go back down to no error whatsoever, because once you mention the rope measure, so it's true that the rope measure can itself be off by 1/24 if you said chaser yeser. But once it's off by more than that, since you mentioned rope measure, you drive it back down to what precisely the amount should have been. No more, no less, right? So that's it says. Once you are going to less than the proper margin of error, so then you could go back to precise margin. And the Yerushalmi here, which you just said, is a little bit unclear the words, but the meaning is relatively clear. That you go from a margin of error. Did it come together?
Yeah, it's my fault.
It's your fault. Okay. You go from a margin of error. If you're going from above a margin of error, then you go back down to no error whatsoever. And also that when you promise to do it based on a survey, so it's precise, 1/24, no more, no less. Okay. Now the next Mishnah, halacha gimel. You guys missed one halacha. Halacha gimel. One halacha. We're on the chaf alf on the alf now. I came late because I got stuck in the snowbank outside in the driveway. The yeshiva should be sued for not clearing its driveway. It's right here, coming in. I made a mistake of coming in this way as opposed to through the light. Okay. Anyway, what? Yes. Mida v'chevel. I was thinking of that when I was burning my rubber. All right, mida v'chevel. Now, if a person said in the contract, mida v'chevel im chaser im yeser. Now, mida v'chevel means precise measure. Chaser yeser means slightly off. So if you, depends what language, how you wrote in the star. If you wrote first mida b'chevel, precise, and then you wrote hein im chaser yeser, if it's off a little bit more, a little bit less, bitul im chaser yeser mida b'chevel. So you go by the second clause, and therefore it will be up to a 24th off. It doesn't have to be precise, exactly precise. On the other hand, if you wrote hein chaser yeser mida b'chevel, first you wrote a little bit less, a little bit more, and then you wrote the words mida b'chevel, then Bito mida b'chevel is hein chaser yeser, then it's got to be absolutely precise, because the second clause though is primary. Kedivri bananas, and that's bananas holds tfos lashon achron. Because the second language in the star, not the first language in the star. Chacham are not sure about that. Now, what if you didn't promise precise surveyor's measurements, which is measuring by rope? Rather, you gave certain signs and certain boundaries as being the areas of which to demarcate the field. So then you have a much greater margin of error. If it's even off by a sixth, then the sale still stands. If it's up to a sixth, in other words, meaning that a sixth, if it's more than a sixth off, then you drive it back down to slightly under a sixth. In other words, let's say it was off by a fifth, right? So you have to drive it back down, the error to under 6. But in contradiction to the previous Mishnah, where it was done by a surveyor's tool, and if it's over 1/24th off, say it's off by 1/23rd,
So then when you correct error, you correct it back to no error because of the surveyor's methods which are meant to be employed. But where there are no surveyor's methods employed, just the general demarcation, and the error was by more than a sixth, all you have to do is drive the error back down, not to nil, but back down to something less than a sixth. Okay? Once it's, say, a seventh of the error as opposed to a sixth, then you're okay. All right? So it says the Gemara, really our Mishnah, except we use the word Yigio in the Mishnah, we use the word Yigio in the Gemara. Tanya Reb Chia said, really, no, to Mishnah, at least as far as I can tell. If somebody sells a slave to his friend, it turned out the slave was a thief or a kidnapper, Yigio. That's why it's a valid sale. Most Tabbanim are thieves or kidnappers, so therefore, tough, right? However, Nimtza Lisim, it turns out he's an armed bandit, a Muchtal Malchus, or he's somebody who's been designated to be conscripted into the king's service as a soldier, Loigio, then that is not expected, and therefore in that case the sale is not a valid sale. Okay, now getting back to our Mishnah itself, Rabbi Huna Amar, Shtusatz or Menachet. If it's off by a sixth precisely, then also you have to restore the error, not completely, of course, like we said before, around to drive it slightly down to the sixth. So sixth in our Mishnah is like more than a sixth, okay? In other words, that also considered to be correctable error above the accepted leeway. The accepted leeway is up to a sixth. Okay, Allah Chadam. Ma'aslisin. Somebody says to his friend, I'm going to sell you half my field. Yerushalmi Bava, they reckon the value of the field among them, and he takes half of the field, based on value, not based on the area. Even if he's going to give you half on the south side, so then he takes half the value just on the house side. So the south side, in other words, they don't divide it up geographically equally, they weight it based on value, just that his portion will come on the south. The recipient accepts upon himself the responsibility of go there, making a fence in that area of a choritz, and the furrow ben choritz, and the furrow there was a larger furrow and a smaller furrow behind the fence in order to prevent wild animals jumping over the fence. The kabel choritz, how much is the deeper furrow, which is immediately next to the fence? Shisha tvachim, 6 tvachim. Ben choritz, literally the son of a furrow, which is a little bit further behind that, is shlosha. So there's 3 tvachim. So that's in order to prevent an animal from getting a grip in the ground and jumping up over your fence, so you make these furrows all around, so they each have to participate in making the furrows around the area which they now own. Okay? Time we learn. Somebody says, friend, this guy is a nut. Okay? He says, friend, I'm going to sell you half my field. So far, so good. But Reuven is on one side of you, and Shimon's on the other side of you. And Levi's on half of your third side. Okay? So what does he mean? How is he describing here half a field? Reuven, Shimon, half of Levi. How do we have such a concept? So it says Ravuna, but it's machlokas these 3 ways. Chadam also can mean pandor. Now pandor is either a belt or a musical instrument, depending on how you learn. But a pandor would look like this. I don't know if you guys kind of like a J. It would look like these are just my surmises. There's no guarantees I'm correct. But you go Reuven, Shimon, and half of Levi, and dividing up to half of the field. Can you see that at all?
I can see the diagram.
Yeah. So it's Reuven, Shimon, half of Levi. That's how you divide the field 50-50. Okay, because that's what he said. He defined the borders. Reuven, Shimon, half of Levi. That's Kamin Pandor. The next line in the Gemara is the other one says Noisos Kamin Matlis, like a belt or a rag. I shouldn't say a belt. Sorry, like a towel. Now there are 2 ways of understanding this. I don't know which one is correct. Either it's like this, like Reuven, Shimon and half of Levi. Instead of being a J, which is hollow in the middle, it's like an angle, right? Like an L, right? It's like a thick L. That would be the second way of learning it. One way of learning it. The other way of learning it is just like a straight tau. That half of Levi, even though he said Shimon on one side and half of Levi on the other, so Reuven on one side and half of Levi on the other side, what he meant is that from Levi the line should go straight out to wherever on Reuven's border it falls out. So it actually would just be a straight up half. It's not clear what matlis means. Does matlis mean like two different precise patches, or does it mean like one long tau? Okay, I'm not sure which way to learn it. And then finally, the last part is Chadamar Nosel Kamim Psika. He gives them like a tooth, or not like a tooth, like something which is interrupted. Now that's the picture Pnei Moshe has. Well, Pnei Moshe's picture doesn't really make any sense, because where's the half of Levi? So actually, the way I redrew it in my Gemara, on Levi's side, there's half of Levi's boundary coincides with my boundary, and half does not, because I divide up Levi's boundary. Half of the halves are in the corners, and the open half is in the middle. So it's Reuven, Shimon, and half of Levi in 2 quarters, like that picture in the Pnei Moshe, but giving some thickness over here at the edges to where he meets up with Levi in order to make it truly correspond to opposite half. Okay? Don't ask me why. I told you before. I have no idea why a guy would divide up his field this way. He's sick. But that's the way we would have divided the field in that case. Okay? Everybody more or less understand that? Okay, those are 3 diagrams. So that's the end of the parak. Now we go on to the next parak. Here's
So the assumption that is that when a person is dividing his field, what exactly?
It's on all technicality that he uses Kakamemi Lashon of Reuven, Shimon, and half of Levi. How are we supposed to deal with that? That's Yeshua. How are we supposed to deal with that and make his stipulation work out?
So that the person does it. This is how we have to divide it. This popular,
Yeah, those are different ways of dividing up to fulfill his statement. I think his statement's kind of saying where he himself doesn't know what he meant. We don't know what he meant. He doesn't know what he meant. So we have to read it to whatever is equitable and fits the criteria. Okay, yesh dochlu manchil. Total change of subject. The rest of the Sechta talks about bequests and corollary halachos thereof. Only 3 more broken, but they're long ones. Yesh dochlu manchil. There are people who bequeath and are bequested too. People who bequeath but are not bequested, the opposite. There are people who are bequested to and people who bequeath. There are people who are bequested to, but they cannot bequeath. There are people who can neither be bequeathed to nor bequest. Hey, and there are those who cannot receive a be bequeathed, nor may they themselves bequest. These are the cases where you have people who can inherit and cause others to inherit as well. A father pass on inheritance to his children, upon himself, and the children pass on inheritance to their father, right? The brothers from the father's side, they also can bequest to their brother if they have no children, or the brother can bequest to them. Now, though that's the first segment of our Mishnah. Ish es imo, a man vis-a-vis his mother, v'ish es ish, or a man vis-a-vis his wife, uvnei achios, and nephews, sons of sisters. Nochlin, they can bequeath to others. In other words, they can the mother can be. They can inherit. The son can inherit the mother. The son can inherit the wife. The nephews can inherit their
their father's sister's their father's sister. However, it doesn't wait the other way around. They can't leave bequest to those others. In other words, the children cannot leave bequest to their mother. Mothers never inherit. Nor husbands leave bequest to their wives. Wives never inherit. Right? Nor nephews to their aunts. The aunts never inherit. Okay? So it says, what it says in the next case, Isha's bena, Vaish's bala, a woman vis-a-vis. I just read that one, right? Sorry. Va'achim min ha'em, brothers, half brothers through your mother. In other words, you share a common mother. Lo nochli v'lo manchilim. Since Nachla always goes through the father's side, so therefore, if you have brothers with you share a mother, there's no bequest, neither to or from them. Okay. Say Nachos kachu. How does it work in giving priorities? Each kimus, if a man dies, uben alone has no son. You transfer his portion to his daughter. However, the son precedes the daughter. If the son has any surviving progeny, then they take precedence over the surviving daughter of the father. And similarly, a daughter comes prior to all the brothers of the deceased. And all the progeny of the daughter, they come before the brothers of the deceased, even if the daughter herself is no longer alive. The brothers precede the uncles. Same idea. Also the progeny of the brothers of the deceased come before the uncles of the deceased. That was general principle. Call them benachla. Anybody who comes first in the inheritance. Yotzei recho. If he has progeny, they also come first in inheritance. A father, it comes before all his children. I'll explain what that means. Says the Mishnah. Stephen says, Ishkiamus, a person who dies, uben and lo doesn't leave a son. So transfer his portion levito to his daughter. Tani Rabbi Shmuel Darshan, this is Bobby as well. Shina Kosov Nachlos is called Nachlos Shabbatorah. This inheritance is different than all inheritance mentioned in Torah. Shibukol, see. By all of them, it says Unesatem. It says give over the portion to somebody. Here it says Vavartem, right? Kanksi Vavartem. Ibor Dinu. It transgresses justice. Shetea Balsireshus that a daughter should inherit. Really, that a daughter should inherit. It was a tremendous chiddush, and it goes against the grain of the Torah, which only gave inheritance to the male side. So therefore, that's why it's Ibor Din. It goes over and distorts the initially given halacha. Now, Chachmei Akum, the sages of the non-Jews. Now they're going to argue now about psukim, the sages of the non-Jews with us. So therefore, the Mashbiach is not so happy saying that they're true non-Jews we're discussing here. He preferred to say the story about the sages of the Kutim, who will deal with psukim, who won't necessarily deal with them the way Chazal want them to be dealt with, and that's how the story works out. The non-Jewish sages say ben ubat shavin ka'achas. A son and daughter inherit equally, right? Like modern American law, right? Son and daughter inherit equally. V'inu darshi, how do they know this? Because they dash like this. Uben ein lo. It says if he doesn't have a son, transfer the portion to the daughter, right? Ha'im yesh lo. So what does it mean? What about if they're both alive, the son and daughter? So they infer that it only goes to the daughter exclusively upon the death of her brother, right? But if the brother's still alive, it doesn't go to her exclusively, right? It goes to both of them, right? Now, I made a mistake. Sorry. Did I? No, I didn't make a mistake. I said it correctly. Let me read inside again, though, because I confused myself. They darshan uben ein lo and v'yeshlo shneim shavim. If there's a son and daughter, they're both equal. You see when they ask v'im ein lo bas. Did you get the Chachmei Akum? Chachmei Akum Omrim Benu bas shavim kachas. A son and daughter inherit equally. Like modern American law, the son and daughter are equal heirs. If he doesn't have a son, that goes exclusively to the daughter. That's the pasuk says. By Mieshlo, they deduce from this if he's got a son, the son and daughter are equivalent. That they both inherit together. Okay? Which we don't pass on. We pass on only the daughter, and there's only son inherits. Right. It's a feminist type position. He simply asks a question like this, folks. He doesn't say, Vim ein lo bas. It says later on in the parsha, if he doesn't have his daughter, you give his nachla to the deceased brothers, right? So it said, then you give it to the brothers of the deceased. If he doesn't have a daughter, then you give it to the brothers. Would you want to say there also that if there are brothers to the deceased, Shneim Shavim, the daughter and the deceased brothers are on the same footing? Can't be. Vaton Modinli, you concede me, the lace it should be Cain. It's not like that, right? That but where there is a daughter, then the brothers don't get anything, right? But why, according to your line of reasoning, that should not work that way. It should be when there is a daughter that and there are brothers of the deceased, that the daughter and the brothers of the deceased should split up equally. Right? Because it says Ubas Einlo, that it goes exclusively to the brothers of the deceased. But in Yeshlo Bas, it would sound like it goes both to the daughter and to the brothers, right? You don't agree to me that that's not true? So it's not true either, meaning that the Chachmei Akum conceded to the drosha of Chachamim. That just like when there's we're going from daughter to brothers of the deceased, we only go to the brothers if there is no daughter. So too, by going from son to daughter, we only go to the daughter if there is no son. Okay, the same idea. So it says what Tzdokim are. The Tzdokim have a different version of this. The Tzdokim say Bas Ben V'Abas. If the deceased had a granddaughter through his son, and his son predeceased him, right? And he has a daughter, okay? So in that case, they said Shneim Shavim. They said if the heirs are the granddaughter and the daughter, they're both equivalent. They darshan Ma Bas Beno Abba Mikoach B'ni. If my granddaughter, who comes from my son, Yerushalmi, this is the dead man talking in the coffin, right? He says, if the daughter of my son comes via my son, in other words, is one generation moved, Yerushalmi, she inherits me. Biti, my daughter, Abba Mikoichi, who's no generations removed. She inherits me. Eno din shatir shein is not kavachorma that she inherits me. So if there's a granddaughter and daughter, that Stoikim learned that they split equally. So when they said to them, no, it's not comparison. If you say by the daughter of the son is true, she'ena ba ela mikoach achim. She's coming from the power of her father and whoever else was around, the brothers who are the children of the deceased, not to be confused with the brothers who told before, who are the brothers of the deceased. Right? She only coming from the power of the brothers, right? Tomru bebas, Shena Baal Mikoach Azokin. Were you going to compare that to a daughter who comes directly from the old man?
meaning that there's simply no comparison, just because no, it's the other way around. It's the daughter, the granddaughter. I think I said it wrong. The granddaughter is superior because the granddaughter comes from a son, as opposed to the daughter who doesn't come from a son. She comes directly from the old man, but in a way which doesn't make her what's the word, entitled to an inheritance. So therefore, there's no comparison. Because it's strong case actually by the one generation move, because of the much more direct link chain to the father. So again, she only comes from the brothers, which is good for her, right? It's actually Girsa in the Bavli, which makes it more palatable. Which means that even if there are brothers, she'll still get. This granddaughter, she'll elbow her way in among her uncles, and she'll get property from her uncles, right? They have to give it to her because she represents her deceased father. So if she has a bunch of uncles, other children of the deceased, she can come in and say, I want my portion as well. As opposed to Tomru B'Basha and Shena, the bas of the daughter, the daughter of the old man herself. Shena because Zargish came only for the power of the old guy. The way the Bavli puts it more succinctly is she can't go, even the daughter who's the sister of the surviving children, the brothers, can't go and claim a portion of the estate. So therefore she surely can't claim a portion of the estate if they're not the parties, if a later generation are parties. So the bottom line is that her claim is not equal in status and receives nothing when there is a granddaughter who comes from a son. Okay, obviously granddaughters come from a son, then she receives nothing. Says more, Talmud Lomar is a new issue, even though Talmud Lomar is usually approved. Here it's a new statement. It says, Matos. It says, any daughter inherits property from Matos. Matos is how many Shvatim? 2. How is such a thing? Where does the daughter inherit 2 Shvatim? No such thing, right? It's like this. There is such a thing. When her father's from one Shevet and her mother's from another Shevet. The truth is, that's also true by a boy. It's not just by a girl, right? But it says, Kobasya, the puzzle is still there talking about daughters. But it's going to tell us obliquely about sons as well, that you can have a son or a daughter who inherits both Shvatim, both the mother and the father, because we said there is a concept of Yerushalmi. Okay? Says the Gemara, Ad Kedun Ben Esav Avos Ben. I'm sorry, Ben Esav. Well, we know that a son inherits the father. How do we know the father inherits the son? How do we know such a thing? The Gemara, Ma'im Ben, I'll tell you. A Ben Sheinu Bo Elam Mikoach Av. A son that I shouldn't say how do we know he inherits. How do we know he inherits prior to his other children who are brothers of the deceased? Or it's maybe he gets an equal portion with his other children, brothers of the deceased. Maybe he gets no portion at all. Now I know he gets a superior portion. Okay? So it says the Gemara, in other words, he gets the only portion. I should make that clear. If there's a father of the deceased around, even if they're brothers of the deceased around, the brothers get nothing. The father gets everything. The father inherits everything from a deceased son, even if there are other brothers around to help him divvy up the spoils. So it says, Aklu ben Esav, obviously, how we know that a son inherits a father and does not have to give to the brothers of the deceased. So you say, She'ima ben, Ma'ima ben, if the son himself, She'enu b'el mikol chavi, only cuts the capacity of his father, Harei Yosho, he inherits. Ha'av she'ein karov, I lost my place. Ha'av she'ein, she'enu ben, I misread this. Let me do it again. From Umayim Ben She'enu Boil Mikol Chav.
The son himself only comes from as a result of the father, right? Yerusha inherits him. Ha'av Shena ben Baal Mikocha, the father was much closer in that the son comes from him. Eino din Yerusha is not a kabel choma that you share at the son. Amarkra, the pasuk says, Karov Kodem. There's actually not a kasha, but a explanation of psukim in line with what we're saying. That the Kal V'chomer teaches us that the father should get before the son. And there, this pasuk also teaches us that the father should before his other brother, before his surviving sons. And so too, the pasuk teaches us, and the Sforah teaches us the same thing. I'm not sure I'm getting this across in an accurate fashion, but the idea is that we're trying to prove that where there is a father, and there are other brothers who are sons of the father, that only the father inherits and not anybody else. Okay? So we're saying that the reason why his son inherits is because he's closer than anybody else to the father, biologically speaking, right? So to the same is true in the reverse. If the son predeceases the father, then the father is the closest. And since closeness is the determining factor in terms of who gets to inherit first, so that's why the father inherits first, before the brothers get the divvy, which means basically the brothers get nothing in this case. Okay, the brothers of the deceased get nothing. Okay? Yeah? Okay. So it says more weiter, Akdum Bas Ben. Akdum Bas. We know now that a daughter can inherit two tribes. Ben. How we know the son can inherit two tribes? Maybe only the tribe of his father. Maybe any land which goes to any additional tribe doesn't go to him. Says the Gemara. If the daughter who has diminished capacity to inherit her father, you enhance her capacity to you enhance her capacity to inherit her mother. In other words, even though a daughter where there's a son does inherit the mother, she does get. You see, it's not exactly similar. What it means is that a daughter has deficiency in Hilchos Yerusha, but by the and nevertheless, she inherits her mother. So Kal V'chomer's son, who doesn't have those deficiencies in Hilchos Yerusha, he certainly should inherit the mother. Again, if the I don't have a difficult today. I'm sorry, it's Thursday night. If the daughter who has difficulties in inheritance inherits her mother, the son who doesn't have any such difficulties in inheritance should certainly inherit his mother. Okay, if the one who's weaker inherits the mother, certainly the one who's stronger should inherit his mother as well. That's all the word is saying. So anyway, that's what it says here. Let me say it inside. A daughter who has less strength vis-a-vis a father. In other words, if there's a son, she's pushed aside altogether. Pisagol is saying we get her advantage that she does get the mother's property, the mother bequeaths. Ben, a son, she Pisagol who gets from the father's property as on a first level. You know, he doesn't get pushed aside for some other reason. He gets immediately. So, Eno Din that we should give him the authority. Bin Nichsei aim to inherit his mother's property as well.
So Nimtze Sabasa Meim Karuf. So it comes out that a daughter is learned out from the pasuk because it says V'chol Bas Yoreshes Nachlo Mimatos, right? It says to Matos, which is plural. From this we learn that the daughter can inherit both father and mother if she's young. There are no sons, and we extrapolate for that by Svara to learn that the same thing happens by a son as well, right? That the son also can inherit his mother. Okay, let's say that again. Nimtze Sabas Lameda, that a daughter inherits a mother is learned from the pasuk. Ben, and the son inheriting the mother is learned from a Kavachomer. Period. Ben Kohen Labas, does the son always come before a daughter? So it says more, no, not necessarily. He said, the butcher. Kachar Rishim ben Yehuda Omer, this Rishim ben Yehuda used to say, Rishim Rebbe, name of Rebbe, Halacha Rabbi Yitzchaya, that the son and daughter inherit equally. Rabbi Yanai Kaputkaya, Havale Uvta. Rabbi Yanai Kaputkaya had a case, Babu Dayanim, and the judges were Rav Hunav, Rabbi Yehuda ben Paziv, and Rav Acha. Rav Acha said, they want the paskin that the daughter gets inheritance in such a case. The case came in front of them. So Rav Acha said the place you pass chutzor, it's like Ben, who was it? That the daughter gets a portion with the son, like Rabbi Yitzchak ben Akatzav. The people are paskin like him, so they are Shem Chutzor said you're the same. Our brothers Chutzor are idiots or commoners. They train us as halacha, and they make a mistake halacha because the psak is that only the son gets. Furthermore, they hold the tradition they received from a certain Rabbi Meloch, the Yerushalmi Levi is accurate. For lazy, okay, it's not true. Rabbi Yerushalmi Levi says, "Hey, look, Rabbi Yitzchaya Katzav. Halacha is not like Rabbi Yitzchaya the butcher." In other words, that the daughter does not get if there is a son. Rabbi Barbara, Rabbi Chia B'Shariot said also, "Ein alok Rabbi Yitzchaya ben Akatzav." Rabbi Lezer avoid Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachor. Lezer father Yitzchak now B'Shem Rabbi Yeshua said, "Ein alok Rabbi Yitzchaya also said, "Ein alok like Rabbi Yitzchaya." Rabbi Yan, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yasin. Rabbi Yan and Yochanan were sitting. All Rabbi Yehuda and the Seus Rabbi Yehuda was the Nasiv generation, the grandson of Rabbeinu HaKodesh came in. Rishon asked the following question: B'chol b'atzi reshus nachli matos mao. What does it mean a daughter inherits from two matos? The question we had at the top of the page. Armalei, so they said, they gave a twist on it. They said, makish mato avla mato aim. There is a parallel drawn between the shaving of the father and the shaving of the mother. Mamata aim, just like by the shaving of the mother. The daughter has no portion where there is a son. Avmata aim, so too by a portion derived from a mother, it's the same thing. She gets the daughter gets nothing if there is a son. Ochilov says more, maybe it's the opposite. Mamata maybe it's the opposite. Matel 8, the shaving of the mother. Yesh Tabas Mokum Ben, the daughter does get in that case, even though there is a son. Av Matel of Yesh Tabas Mokum Ben. So too, where there is a shaving of the father, the boss may inherit the mother. More than that, maybe we could say by the case of a woman giving birth. By the mother, that the mother actually, the daughter and son participate in the dividing up her property. So to, let's say, by a son. The son, when he inherits the mother, he and the daughter divide the property equally. Actually makes no sense what I just said. If, in the case of a daughter, no, I'll have to start the case of this. In the case of the mother dies, the son and daughter can inherit equally.
So why not when the father dies? Why not say the same thing? That's the Gemara's question. It's a very simple question. I'm just obfuscating. If in the case where the mother dies, both the daughter and son can inherit equally. So that's also the case if the father dies, both the mother and son the daughter and son can inherit equally. Okay? So he says, that was actually Rabbi Nasia's question to the rabbis. Let's say the same thing. Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Yana, let us leave here. Let's say Guvra boy Mishma Mil Doraisa. This guy, the Nasi, he doesn't want to hear a word of Torah. Well, he doesn't want to us to paskin, wants to paskin for himself. We paskin the other way. We paskin that both by inheritance by the father and inheritance by the mother. I think we paskin this way. That the son gets and not the daughter gets. I'm not 100% sure about that. Let's see if we can find this quickly to check if that's correct. What?
Why wouldn't that be correct?
I think it is correct. The way we read the only reason what would be correct is if in fact the daughter does get a portion when her mother dies. I don't think
the first side of the child.
First side is for sure correct. That if the father dies, only the son gets. The question is why the father dies. Not a while. Both when the father dies and the mother dies, the daughter never gets anything unless there's no sons. Or if there's son, the daughter gets nothing. So that's a fact. So that Rabbi Yossi was trying to be a pest. So I don't know if he's trying to be a pest, but they deemed him being a pest. He wasn't accepting this halacha, so they left the Beis Medrash. Vayishasimo, it says a man inherits his mother. Vayishasishto, a man inherits his wife. Lo Vayishasimo, lo Ishasishto. Now there's a line missing here. Actually, it's clear, though it's not in the Skoria leader. It says later on in the Mishnah also. It says the flip side of that. It says Ishasimo. It says later on, but not a mother her son. It says Ishasishto, it says later on, not a wife, her husband. So is it obvious? Why does it have to say twice? So says the Gemara. I skipped the line. No, I didn't skip. Did I skip the line before? No, I didn't skip anything. Okay. So he said, So the question is why we need both why we need both sides in the Mishnah. The Gemara doesn't really answer. The answer is obviously clear. The answer is really we need both. We're just trying to be symmetrical. But the Gemara does ask why we need both. That a son inherits his mother, and a husband inherits his wife, and also we have to say the opposite, but not a mother inheriting her son, nor a wife inheriting her husband. Is that obvious? One's the flip side of the other. Okay, the Gemara doesn't really answer. Rabbi Yitzchak boy Meimar, Yitzchak wanted to say it says here fasteno, but the other gears in this is phantasm. He wanted to say a fantasy. Now, what does fantasy mean? He wanted to say a chiddush. He had to say a shiur, and he wanted to say a chiddush. For lo ashkach, he couldn't find a chiddush to say. So what did he say? He said, so he said this other halacha. This other halacha, the proper gears is on the bottom here, the Gilin Ephraim. You have two lines of Gilin Ephraim, the natives still have the old Gilin. Okay. So the birthplace is the same as the one, and it's a little bit different, a little bit shorter. Ben says the son. Ainli ela Ben. I only know his son inherits. Ben. I don't know the grandson inherits if the son is dead. Or Ben Bas, a grandson through a daughter if there were no boys. Tam Lomar Ben. Says Ben, Mikom Makom. Whoever it's going to be a son. Bas, similarly a daughter. Ainli ela Bas. I only know the daughter herself. Bas Ben. Bas. I don't know the granddaughter as well. Tam Lomar, it says Bas. Mikom Makom. Bas needs no matter what. Now, then the last thing Gemara says, getting back to itself, three lines from the end, the last word of the line. Achim, brothers, Eli Elo Achim, only know brothers inherit. B'nei Achim, how do we know that the sons of the brothers, or B'nos Achim, the daughters of the brothers, B'nei Bonos Achim, the grandchildren of the brothers, Minano, they all inherit if there were no sons and daughters. We always go to the closest relative, whoever that is. And even further down the line of progeny, those are the one who inherit the deceased individual. Okay? Says Mishnah further, halacha base. The daughters of Slavcha took 3 portions in their inheritance land of Israel. The portion of their father shared the Yotzim tribe, who left Egypt. And his portion with his brothers, Benichse Chefer, in the property of his father. Besides his Bechor, got 2 portions. As the Bechor gets 2 portions. So I'm going to explain all these things in the Gemara. The B'nos said before Moshe Rabbeinu, if we had the B'nos Slavcha, meaning if we're considered to be children, then Nirasha Savina, let us inherit our father. You may not know stuff, if we're not to do it, so I mean, not that they're not biological, but meaning that they don't inherit. Tisya, because there are no heirs. Tisya, then why don't we go Yibum or Chalitza? Not us, sorry, our mother. Tisya made to let our mother undergo Yibum or Chalitza, right? Because she, if daughter's not considered to be kids, so then she didn't leave our father Slavcha any kids, so therefore she have to undergo Yibum or Chalitza at this point, right? So, Miyad immediately Vayakre Moshe Mishpat Lifnei Hashem. Moshe brought their court case before God. Kodesh Baruch said, came to Slavcha Dovros, the daughters of Slavcha, they're talking good. Telem Achuzos Nachalo, give them a portion. In Eretz Yisrael, Telem Karkos, give them land. Telem Metaltim, give them also movable objects. Telem Chelik Abiyem, and get a portion of father among the father's brothers. Now, what does that mean? So I'm going to explain it a little bit. It's actually going to have 2 versions. Rabbi Yosef says, when they gave up the land, they gave it up based on the fiction that the people who left Mitzrayim had actually entered the land of Israel. There must be some point of justice in that. But that's how they used to base. That's how they based it. In other words, everybody used to inherit not what they were holding now when they entered Israel, but on the basis of the last census as they left Egypt. Those are the people who inherit, and whatever was divided up among them evenly was then given over to bequests from generation to generation. But the heirs were the people were there at Yitzias Mitzrayim. The Sefer says, Mishmos Matos Abosav. When they were counted, distributed, they counted by the names of the Shvatim of their forefathers. So that's because why it's that you divide the land to them. And next time to say that to Leila, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, divide up to men like yourselves. Don't give the land of Israel to women, chas v'shalom, or to children. Right? Says the Gemara that men get a portion of land, not women and children. He said, like when Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking to them, he said, or Hashem was speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu, he says, "Le'ela techol ekoretz."
She's not pointing to the towards,
Pointing the kind of person, right? Okay. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yogamar leboyoretz is how called oretz. Now it's divided up to the people who enter the land of Israel. In other words, it's le'ela techol. These people should be divided up. So that's the case why it says Shmos Matos Avos of Nachlu. Shmos Matos Avos. Why did it say that by the names of the tribes of the fathers? Says when this brought down Rashi Chumash, Meshur Nachlu will be called Nachlu Shmuel. This inheritance was different than all other inheritance in the world. How is it different? You call Nachlu by all Nachlu Shmuel in the world. Chaim Yoshma Mason. Live people inherit from dead people. Here, however, Mason, yours become Mason, Yoshua Chaim. Here, the dead people inherited the live people. Now, there's a fascinating Rashi where Al Torah brings it down, and Yerushalmi is more explicit later on the page. Let's say a family had 10 members enter the land of Israel. 9 brothers and 1 cousin. Okay, so they had 2 fathers, right? Do you have that so far? 10 people in the land of Israel, 9 brothers, one cousin, and they had 2 separate fathers. If you divide up the land to people came into Israel, how many portions do you have doled out? 10. And who would have gotten it? The 9 brothers and the 1 cousin, right? If you say how many portions would there be? 2. And the 9 would divide up their portion equally, and the 1 would divide up his portion. I mean, which means he would keep it, not give it to anybody else, right? However, the way it works is that they first used to took today's census, and they come up with the number 10. But then they should go back to the census of Yitzias Mitzrayim, right? And they take whatever was there in Mitzrayim, right? What would they do with what it says in Mitzrayim? What would they do with the? Yeah, they would take the numbers now, the 10, and go back to Yitzias Mitzrayim. And how would they divide up then? Right. Oh, yeah. Okay. It's fine like this. In other words, again, you have 2 people every time. They have 10 kids, 9 and 1. Okay. If you would let God just go into Israel, would have gone to 2 portions. That's all. Would have gone by Ecclesiastes, so he would have gotten 10 portions, right? But it would be 9 and 1. What you do is you take the 10 and you go back to the 2. You share among the 2. Now you distribute it among the children that entered Eretz Yisrael. So actually you take 10 portions, divide it up among the 2 dead fathers, so it would be 5 and 5. And now the 9 divide up 5, and the 1 cousin gets all 5 of the other portion. That's how it works. So you take into account both those that entered Eretz Yisrael in determining how much land to get, and in terms of determining how to allocate that internally, then you do that based on the Yotzei Mitzrayim.
drawing a blank? No, it's the second step.
Makes you have two.
Right, but that's the second step. First, you determine how much land based on the Nichnosim L'Eretz Yisrael. Then you determine how the land is distributed based on the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Nadine, you get it?
I think so. So, wow, so what is it happening is this one cousin.
The one cousin gains by this.
Yeah, he
gets 5, yeah. That's what's happening. He gains significantly by this procedure. Okay? Where is the I got further ahead than you did in the Bible cover.
I got just as far as you did.
Nady knew more than I did. It's neither all wrong. It's in Pinchas. Yeah. I thought Rashi brings on the process. Yeah, here it is. According to the names of the tribes of Father, those who are the ones who went out of Egypt. Scripture differentiated this inheritance from all the inheritances from all the inheritance mentioned in the Torah. For reverence to all inheritance, the living inherit the dead. But here the dead inherit the living. How is this? Suppose 2 brothers of those who went out from Egypt, who had sons among those who came to the land. One brother had 1 son, and the other had 3 sons. So he does 1 and 3 instead of 1 and 10, 1 and 9. The 1 son received 1 portion, and the 3 sons received 3. For the estate unto the east of the land should be divided. Then their inheritance reverted to their grandfather, and they divided all equally. And that is the meaning of what is stated according to the names of the tribes of the tribes of their fathers. They shall inherit. For after the sons receive their portions, they divide according to the fathers who had gone out of Egypt. But at the beginning, they divided according to the number of those who had gone out of Egypt. These 4 would have received only 2 portions. Now they received 4 portions. I don't think that Rashi made it any clearer than I said it before. No. But it was less brothers, maybe it works. So if you have 4 brothers entering, 3 brothers and 1 cousin entering the land of Israel, they get 4 portions, right? But since it goes back to the Yotzei Mitzrayim, what's going to end up is the 3 brothers are going to divide up 2 portions. And the other 1 cousin is going to get 2 portions as well. So that's how it's going to work, okay? So that's, Tyre B'Shur Kol Omer, the Yotzei Mitzrayim Ula Omdim, Be'arvos Moav. He says that to those who left Mitzrayim and those who stood in Arvos Moav, they divided up. In other words, everybody, there were additional portions here. In other words, you got a portion if your father came out of Egypt, and you got an additional portion if you were entered and were staying there in Arvos Moav. So it wasn't just that the 4, according to him, it wasn't that you got 4 portions and how to reallocate that we went back up. No, you got portions based on 2 elements, both on how many of your family left Mitzrayim and how many of you are now entering Eretz Yisrael. Okay? Ketzad.
How should was so Mishayam Yotzi Triim, there was some guy who both left Egypt and was standing by Arabasmov, Notashnechalokim, he got two portions himself. One because he left Egypt, and the other because he's entering Eretz Yisrael. Riyotze Mitzrayim, he was from the people who left Egypt, Velomio di Arabasmov, but not people who were saying Arabasmov, because he was dead by now. Right? Or a person wasn't old enough then when they light it up, then not then he gets one portion. Okay? So now we're going to have to see how much Benos Tzlavchad got as a result of this as the exercise. But it's already late and everybody's falling asleep except for Nady. So we will stop here for this evening. What?